sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Happy Easter Monday to you and yours in Poland, Hungary and other Central European Catholic countries. On this day, the boys douse the girls in perfume and smack their bottoms to increase fertility. Don't worry, I'm not recommending it. I'm in enough trouble with Ofcom anyway. It's just part of our series on fascinating Easter Monday traditions. On tonight's Mark Steyn Show, live on your telly and on your wireless, our own Easter tradition, the Archbishop of Canterbury makes it all about politics. Growing so sleepy, Archbishop. And our own every other day of the week tradition, an infelicitous hashtag can cost you your job. Plus, is Rwanda the new Nauru? And the indestructible Rotherham survivor Sammy Woodhouse weighs in on a new tool that encourages even more inertia from the appallingly useless British police. Plus your thoughts live and in real time, so do send them along by email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or via Twitter @gbnews. No need to be a shrinking violet like Keir Starmer when he's asked about women's penises. Just get it all off your chest. All that coming up after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom. And our top story this evening, the family of a former British soldier who was captured by Russia says prisoners of war rules should be followed and he must be treated humanely. Sean Pinner, who was taken while fighting in Mariupol, and another British citizen, Aidan Aslin, appeared on Russian state TV, asking for help to return home. It's not clear how freely the pair could speak.
To Boris Johnson, obviously, I'm Sean Pinner. A lot's gone on over the last 5 or 6 weeks that I'm not fully aware of. Obviously, I understand that Mr. Medvedchuk has been detained, and we look to exchange myself and Aidan Aslin for Mr. Medvedchuk. Obviously, I'd really appreciate your help in this matter and pushing this agenda.
Meanwhile, a Ukrainian minister says the Russian invasion has damaged up to 30% of his country's infrastructure at a cost of around £76 billion. And there's been heavy bombardment in the east of the country as well as in the west. The Lviv mayor says at least 7 people were killed after 5 Russian missile strikes hit his city. And the situation in Mariupol has also been described as extremely difficult. No evacuation corridors have been opened up for a second consecutive day. And Ukraine has completed the latest stage of its application to join the European Union. Following a meeting with his cabinet, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky handed over a finished questionnaire to the EU's ambassador to Ukraine. And he described the application for membership to Europe as a formality, saying the Ukrainian people have been a part of Europe for a long time. Some breaking news we received within the last half hour here at GB News. Cristiano Ronaldo, the footballer, has announced that his newborn son has died, but that the baby's twin, a daughter, has been born safely. The footballer and his wife, Georgina Rodriguez, shared the news on social media a short time ago, saying, "It is with our deepest sadness that we have to announce that our baby boy has passed away. It is the greatest pain any parents can feel. Only the birth of our baby girl gives us the strength to live this moment with some hope and happiness." And the couple have asked for privacy at this difficult time. Police Scotland say no action will be taken against the First Minister after video emerged of her without a face mask indoors during local council election campaign. The force did speak to Nicola Sturgeon to remind her of the importance of wearing a face covering when there is a legal requirement to do so. In a statement, she apologised, saying she realised her error seconds after entering the barber shop and immediately put one on. The legal requirement to wear face masks on public transport or inside public spaces has been lifted in Scotland today. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. And now, it's Mark Steyn.
Thank you, Polly. Happy Easter. Britain is the land where everything is policed except crime. So, for example, the Metropolitan Police continue to investigate Cakegate as a series of individual separate parties for which they'll be issuing new distinct fines every 6 weeks or so. Why are they investigating the confessed serial cake addict Johnson as a series of unconnected incidents, unconnected cakes? Do I really need to tell you? Because that way it improves their crime-solving statistics. Otherwise, their conviction rate is not quite statistically undetectable, but it's getting close to it. Here's the most recent numbers. The proportion of all crimes resulting in a charge or summons for England and Wales. These are the official statistics from the Home Office, by the way. You see that purple line sagging down to the bottom right-hand corner? That's the number of crimes that end in a charge or summons. Not necessarily a conviction, just a charge, just a court appearance. That's down to 7%. And that's why the Met investigates every slice of Johnsonian cake as a separate incident, because it means one stretch of a small side street in Whitehall has a 100% crime clear-up rate, and that dramatically improves the statistics for the rest of South West 1. But otherwise, just 7% of crimes get to a charge or summons. So if you're watching an old movie or TV show and Dixon of Dock Green tells the young scallywag that crime doesn't pay, in England and Wales it most certainly does pay. It's got a 93% chance of paying for you very handsomely, so go for it. Now you see that red line, by the way, back on that graph, rocketing up to the top right of the graph. Can we put the graph back up here? That line rocketing up to top right. Are we? Is it coming? I think it's coming. Anyway, there's a big red line there, way above there. You see the 7%, the purple line at the bottom, that's the lousy rate of crimes ending in a charge. And that big red line up at the top, if you're thinking that's something the police can actually do and have a terrific rate, ooh, what's it getting up to there? Getting close to 27%? No, actually, that's what they call evidential difficulties, where the victim doesn't want to press charges. And very conveniently for the United Kingdom's useless plods, it seems that more and more victims don't want to go to court. That rather overlooks, however, the amount of persuasive evidence that both coppers and prosecutors lean on victims to decide against pressing charges. We've discussed it on this show in relation to Sir Jimmy Savile, OBE, KCSJ, back when he was alive and there were witnesses willing to testify against him. But it goes on every day in far less famous cases. Samina Halliwell and her family went to Liverpool police, Merseyside police, I think they're called this week, Merseyside police, to report her rape and 3 beatings by an older boy at school. The police advised her not to go to trial, and now she can't because 12-year-old Samina took a bottle of pills and killed herself. So she's up in that red line of evidential difficulties with Sir Jim's accusers and many others. COVID has made the police worse, not just because they got used to an easy life of hectoring grannies lingering too long on park benches or sending half a dozen officers to break up Uncle Fred sitting with 2 of his mates in the garden, but because that took up what little time they used for investigating real crime. So, for example, the median time to lay a charge in a rape case in England and Wales has increased 7-fold, from 70 days pre-COVID, that's a little over 2 months, to 465 days. That's over a year and a quarter. Only 3% of sexual offences result in a charge or summons. So if your tastes run to sexual assault, well, Her Majesty's Constabulary are most unlikely to trouble you. We now learn that the inert British police have a new tool, so-called community resolution. All you have to do is admit you did it and say you're sorry. That's it. According to the Daily Mirror, 870 sex offenders have been the beneficiaries of community resolution. They said they were sorry about the rape, and the police said, thanks, mate, that's all we need. The sorry card applies not only to rape of grown-ups, but to child rape. Durham, Cheshire and Nottinghamshire constabularies use community resolution for the rapes of girls under 13. Norfolk did likewise for the rape of a young boy. The biggest use of community resolution, 78 cases, was by South Yorkshire Police. That's right, the fellows who turned a blind eye to Rotherham's so-called grooming gangs, decade in, decade out. And you know, by the way, South Yorkshire Police have actually said to us that none of these community resolutions under their aegis was for rape, but they've declined to answer what they actually were for. We tried to get an answer. We're going to keep trying to get an answer out of them on that. You know the best part, though, about admitting to raping a 12-year-old girl or a 7-year-old boy under this system? You don't get a criminal record. Hallelujah! Pop the champagne. Break out the cake. Oh, no, sorry. Wait, that one the coppers take seriously. Let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can Twitter me at GBNews. Why do we cover these stories? Because someone has to. 4 years ago, the Telford grooming gang scandal broke. The mass chronic sex slavery of young white girls by mostly Muslim men of mostly Pakistani origin was too painful for our national broadcaster, the one that you pay for. So it wasn't on the BBC News homepage or the BBC UK homepage or the BBC England homepage or even the BBC Shropshire homepage. Although in fairness, after 36 hours of negative online comments, someone from BBC Radio Shropshire managed to file a report on the subject that you'd be forgiven for not spotting because it got less prominence on their website than a compilation video called My Telford, the usual bit of fatuous feel-good community boosterism that neglected to mention the town is a hellhole of child sex slavery. What happened in Telford is shameful. When a nation declines to be ashamed and look away, that is far worse and very telling. Sammy Woodhouse is an indestructible survivor of Rotherham, a victim of both the gangs and of South Yorkshire Police's total indifference. It's always great to see her, even in circumstances such as this. What's your reaction to this idea that you can commit child rape in this country and be let off with a so-called community resolution where all you have to do is say, oh, I'm sorry for raping the kid, can I go now?
It's just absolutely insane. I honestly couldn't believe what I was hearing when I got told that this is what's been happening. And, am I surprised by this? Probably not. I mean, we've known for many decades now that this has been happening. It's been getting ignored, brushed under the carpet, victims blamed, criminalised, etc. But then we hear lessons have been learned. Well, clearly lessons aren't being learned. I definitely want to know a lot more information of what's been happening. Now, for something like this to happen and, to be given to, say, for example, somebody that's stolen something from a shop, then, that's fair enough. But we're talking about, child rape here. And I just feel like this is another blow to victims and survivors. And, I spoke to many people and I myself feel like we're just not getting taken seriously. I feel like we're starting to normalise this as a country because it's just so much of a problem. I feel like authorities are just overwhelmed with it. It's been ignored and brushed under the carpet for so long. They just don't know what to do. It's just absolutely shocking. It's disgusting.
Well, you go back a long way with the police in South Yorkshire. But every day something like this happens. In Dorset, for example, a woman called 999. She was being stalked by a guy. The fella eventually, after stalking her for an hour and 3/4, raped her. The Dorset police said, we were having a few too many calls that day, so we just decided to close her case, and no one responded to it. And then they say, but our thoughts after he's been convicted belatedly and sent to jail, they say our thoughts continue to remain with the victim of this abhorrent offending. I'm wondering, Sammy, do you think the police are actually so hardened to sexual assault and child grooming and all the rest of it that they don't, the persuasive evidence just looking at their actions is that they don't give a crap about it?
I think there's all different reasons. Now, I can't sit and say every single police officer in the country is, a bad person, because I know that they are some good police officers. I know that from your own personal experience, and I know that from, my line of work. So I know they are some good people out there, and not just police officers, but people in other professions as well. And I think, even they are so frustrated because they're under-resourced, they're understaffed. Some officers are just kind of basically trying to work with what they can work with. But then, there's some that are just totally uneducated on how to even approach a victim. They've not had the proper training, etc. There is so much work that needs to be done when it comes to police forces. And I just don't feel like enough is being done. And, we're the people that are having to pay with our lives for this. What are the government doing about it? Why aren't there enough officers? Why aren't they trained properly? Why are they having to close cases that shouldn't be closed with because there's just too much coming in? It's not good enough.
But you say they need more training. It used to be at periods in this country's and other countries' histories that it was understood that you had a duty to protect the most vulnerable in our society, like young girls who are sexually assaulted and apparently in the UK now get punished with a community resolution. You didn't have to undergo training for that. You didn't have to do 3 months of training. It was part of what it meant to be human. If you don't actually care about a 12-year-old girl being raped, in a certain sense, you aren't human. And what's depressing about this is we see what the police prioritise. Why don't they prioritise this?
I agree. This should be at the top of everybody's agenda. And sometimes it's not even about training. And you're right, it's just about common sense. And I still don't feel it's taken seriously enough whatsoever. And what we have to remember as well is when you're saying to a rapist, if you say sorry and apologise, well, they've had no punishment, they've had no consequence. So that offender is going to go on to keep re-offending. We need to be harsher with this, and we need to be giving better support to victims. We need to be putting out harder sentences. You have people that are dealing drugs. I'm not saying for 1 second dealing drugs is okay, but you have people that are dealing drugs and doing other crimes that are serving more time in prison than people that are raping children and babies. We have a system that's not fit for purpose, and it's failing victims. And if anything, it's just supporting and promoting that it's okay for sex offenders to just do whatever the hell they want.
Well, when you said about this community resolution that you could see it being used for, a parking ticket or a schoolboy snaffling a Cadbury's cream egg from the local newsagent or whatever, isn't the problem with British policing is that it all starts with, OK, we're just going to have community resolutions for stealing the Cadbury's cream egg. And then eventually they, simply because of laziness or indifference or a brutal heartlessness to the victims of British crime, they lump more and more crimes into the stealing a Cadbury's cream egg category. And so, serious things, they're not serious anymore to these guys.
Yeah, I think it's kind of very backwards how we're looking at things. You have children being, criminalised for being victims. I mean, for example, if you look at the Rochdale cases that broke this week, that after a decade, they finally received an apology from Chief Constable, I think Steve Watson, that didn't even have anything to do with this scandal. But of course, he knows about that too well because he was the Chief Constable of South Yorkshire Police, which is my own force. But, if we look at the Rochdale victims, they were criminalised. They've been treated far worse than any sex offenders. And it's absolutely shocking. I mean, the Rochdale survivors never fail to amaze me with their bravery and their courage. They're just fantastic, and they've helped, kind of reel a pathway changing a country in regards to criminal and sexual exploitation. But again, victims are being treated badly, while sex offenders still aren't being held to account properly. But yeah, we're dealing, I think, in my opinion anyway, with petty crime, kind of far worse than serious crime. I think we have a backward system.
No, and as you said, you and others of the victims of these gangs wound up with criminal records, whereas if you rape a 9-year-old boy in Norfolk, you don't wind up with a criminal record. But not to worry, because as you said, in 10 years' time, the Chief Constable might issue you with an apology if you live that long. This is terrible stuff, Sammy. It's always good to see you, and we're going to stay on top of this story. We're going to get to your reaction next on this. GBViews at gbnews.uk. You can Twitter me at GBnews. Do you think it would be too much to ask the Archbishop of Canterbury if he could put in a word about what's the religion once in a while? And detained in Nauru for 6 years. That's all straight ahead.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
As I said, Britain is the land where everything is policed except crime. Let's get your take on this. A Twitter user says, "What fresh hell is this? Community resolutions for the crime of sexual assault? Johnson and Patel have lost the plot." Min tweets at us, "My word, saying sorry is okay. Lives are ruined through sexual abuse and rape. You get more punishment for speeding." Ruth says, "If you didn't highlight this terrible policing record in our country, I just wouldn't have believed it. But you did, and now I do. Shameful." I think every person right now ought to be ashamed of the state of the British Constabulary. And I say that, it gives me no pleasure to say that, but they're either useless or actually they're contributing actively to the corrosion of our society. Judith says, "Please keep on reporting this lack of police action in everything. Thank God we've got GB News and Mark Steyn to highlight real crime. We, the silent majority, don't care about Cakegate." Yes, a functioning constabulary has to be able to investigate cake and other stuff. It can't just say we're tied up with cake for the next year and a half. Last week, it was announced that migrants crossing the English Channel from Calais and everywhere else, but mostly from Calais, would be sent to Africa for our Commonwealth cousins in Rwanda to process their claims. We're not the first of Her Majesty's dominions to ship would-be migrants to remoter parts of the Commonwealth. Australia deals with its own illegal incomers by sending them a couple of thousand miles away to Nauru, which is basically a small rock of bird droppings. Nothing against that. The phosphate business was very lucrative for them until the bottom dropped out and the government of Nauru was forced into alternative economic strategies, such as investing in a terrible West End musical about Leonardo, which flopped spectacularly. My next guest, Ilah Zivada, also loves the theatre. She's an Iranian artist and filmmaker who was detained in Nauru from 2013 to 2019, and her photography helped expose the conditions in that detention centre. She's now made a film about it, searching for Arama Sayesh Gar. Ilah, but just before we get to Nauru, you decided you needed to get out of Iran, which is entirely reasonable. I don't think many of the people watching this would want to find themselves living in Iran. Why did you pick Australia?
Well, hello, Mark. Happy Easter to you and your viewer. First of all, I really appreciate that you are trying to cover the issue from different angles. Well, at the time, I didn't have enough time to think where I'm going to. It was just the first solution, the first way that I could find. So I didn't have any plan to how to seek asylum from a country. So at the time I was vulnerable with no solution. It was just the first thing that I could do without any planning. So that's what led me to being exiled and imprisoned for 6 years in the Pacific island of Nauru. I sought asylum from Australia actually because I saw democracy exist. I thought democracy exists in Australia, but I was wrong. It wasn't. It wasn't.
Australia is a democratic society, but it has famously about the toughest immigration laws among the Western world these days. I mean, America has open borders. The UK has an open southern border, more or less. But Australia, even a subject of the same Queen from, say, England or from Canada cannot get on a plane to Australia without having a visa giving them permission to land in Australia. So I wonder, I'm curious as to what's going through your mind when you decide to go to a country with the toughest immigration policies in the West.
Well, actually, Mark, I wouldn't say this is the toughest immigration policy in the West, as we are seeing that how quick they are giving visa to Ukrainian refugees. That's the issue of racism. I would say everything that they did was a policy based on racism to make money and enrich a few private companies. That's the brief of the situation and what happened to us.
Well, do you think it's that, or do you think it's? No, I'm just curious to understand the thinking here, because as you know, Iran has diplomatic relations with all kinds of countries. I'm not even sure it should have diplomatic relations because it's a state that sponsors state terrorism. So I've no idea why countries want to maintain embassies there. But they do. And Australia has an embassy in the heart of downtown Tehran. I find it puzzling that you didn't know what was going to happen to you, considering this terrible place in Nauru, and I don't want to be in a detention camp in Nauru myself. I've got no desire to, but it's been there for 20 years. And the Australian embassy in Tehran says, please note that all foreign nationals need to obtain a visa prior to travelling to Australia. Were you stunned when you get there and you find you're then to be shipped thousands of miles away? I don't quite understand why this wasn't known.
No, first of all, when I left the country, actually that was a terrible, weird coincidence that the day that I fled the country was exactly the day that they passed the law. So I had no idea what's going to happen to me. I had no idea that for many other people, it happened exactly when they were on the boat. So they didn't know what's going to happen. And with the picture that we have from first world countries in our country, in Iran or in Afghanistan or Iraq, we believe that these countries respect human rights. We cannot believe that there is abuse of human rights in this scale in the country like Australia or the UK or the United States. We couldn't believe that. Even if we hear that, we think this is our government propaganda to say this is what's happening in Western country. You know, that's the situation. That's the situation that we face. We don't trust our own government. We don't trust our own news. So we don't believe if they say this country is gonna do that to you. We say you are the liar, as you said. We say you are the terrorist. You are the one who are doing the abuse of human rights. That's what's happening.
Okay. You find yourself on a boat heading to Australia. How much did you pay to get to Australia? Was it a lot of money?
It wasn't a lot of money. It was, I think at the time it was like $5,000. But the issue right now is not a cheap trip to go to a first world country. The issue is not that. The issue is the policy is cruel. Priti Patel is so defensive about her plan and is claiming a lot that it's not even comparable with the Australian policy, while it's exactly the same policy, exactly the same plan. Yes, they haven't revealed the details about their plan, but I say that because she's using the same language, the same excuses that Australian government at the time used. They are claiming that they are going to stop the death of people at the sea. 12 of us died in Australia Offshore Processing Center because of the lack of medical services. We had nothing. A lot of women and children, thousands of cases of sexual abuses on children happened in Nauru Detention Center, if that is your concern. And now,
no, I agree.
You're concerned about the increasing number of asylum seekers coming by boat to the UK, but the policy was never succeed because they never stopped the asylum seekers from coming. like the number of asylum seekers arriving by plane was much more at the time. So this is just a policy to targeting a group of people. Not you are concerned about like next year that it's gonna be 60,000 asylum seekers coming to the UK. They're not gonna send them all to the offshore processing center. They are going to randomly pick few of them, send them there in indefinite detention, which is absolute torture, to make money. She says this is a development
they don't
plan.
No, nobody wants to make money out of it, because the cost of shipping people to Rwanda or Nauru. What a lot of people think it's about, Elaha. Just answer me this, Elaha. Just answer me this. Does the government of Australia have the right to select its own immigration policy and choose who it wants to immigrate to the country? Does the United Kingdom have that right? Iran certainly does.
Check on Guardian report about the corporations who got contract in offshore processing center, which are the biggest donor of Liberal Party. It was firstly a racist idea for the Liberal Party of Australia to win the election by gaining the votes of right-wing people in Australia. Secondly, was an economic plan just to enrich their friends, their donor. And
it's nothing to do with the money.
It was supposed to be a compensation.
It's nothing to do with the money. They don't want every. You should have gone. Okay. We can't have a conversation if you're gonna talk over. Okay, here's the thing. To go to Australia,
a lot of information, and I'm trying to make it clear. Just look at the data. Just look at the reports which already are existing.
No, okay, that's enough, Elaha. We can't have it not talking. Here's the real situation. Her Majesty's Australian government thinks that as a sovereign nation, it has the right to determine who enters its country. And that often involves a lot of paperwork. Life is paperwork in the West. America's full of paperwork. Britain's full of paperwork. France is full of paperwork. And the fact of the matter is that you're a talented person from an educated background. If you'd gone along to the Australian embassy in the heart of Tehran, they might well have issued you a visa. But they don't let anybody land unless they've done the paperwork, and they're not going to make an exception for you. I wish you the best of luck with your film, and you've had a terrible time. But in the end, there will be no Western societies if they cannot control their borders. Thank you, Elaha. Rwandans are not Nauruans, and hard as it may be for the British left to believe, there are plenty who sincerely want to do their bit to help the global refugee crisis.
It's not about whether they're male or they're a certain gender. It's about giving a hand to a crisis that is actually become a global crisis. And for me, at the end of the day, when I look at it in the global spectrum, it's not about, whatever Rwanda is or it being a certain gender, that male that is being accepted. It's about stepping in to come and give support where you can. And
come and give support where you can. I'd be intrigued to get Maggie Mutesi and the Archbishop of Canterbury in a room together and see what she thinks about the weird focus of his Easter sermon, in which instead of making his theme Jesus and the empty tomb, the Archbishop went and rolled away the giant cake outside the tomb of number 10. He yanked out the PM and berated HMG for a migrant policy that does not, quote, stand the judgment of God. John O'Sullivan joins me from the Danube Institute in Budapest. John, do you think the Church of England might profitably knock it off with the politics, even if it's just for Christmas and Easter?
Well, the Church of England, and it has to be said, most modern Christian religions, and I am a Catholic, that these religions have abandoned Christianity a lot of the time in order to follow progressive pieties. And one of the progressive pieties, of course, is that you can't have an immigration policy which protects your own borders. Now, this is very extraordinary that this should be the case. Hasn't been the view of Christianity over the centuries. One of the important points about Christianity is it has always it's had an uncomfortable relationship with nations and nation states, which to some extent, particularly the Catholic Church, felt was not sufficiently Catholic. But nonetheless, it has accepted that, first of all, the nations have a right to exist, and that anyone coming to them has got to respect their laws and culture, and that they can be admitted or kept out in accordance with reasonable rules. The Archbishop of Canterbury doesn't seem to have a kind of grasp of that at all. I'd say, for example, if you look at the three policies available to him on the people crossing the Channel, one is to keep them out. The other is, and to do that, you've got to find a way of dealing with them when they get here. And so you've got the government's policy. The second one is to actually say, look, we recognize that people are trying to get a better life, but there can't be a human right to come and live in this country or indeed in Australia. And consequently, and the other thing is very important, modern Christianity has lost a sense of evil. Its humanitarianism does not recognize, for example, such things as the fact that the people coming here, they may be people searching for a better life, but they're paying sums of money to fairly evil people, and those evil people essentially promise them to get them certainly to Britain, where they'll be safe and secure. But at the same time, some of them drown, and when they get to England, they find themselves staying in hotels for long periods, and now they find themselves possibly being transferred to Rwanda. I don't think that the message of the Archbishop of Canterbury has much relevance to the realities facing the British, but also the refugees.
Isn't it also the case that he doesn't have much relevance to religious life in this country? I think the churches, but particularly the Church of England, missed a huge opportunity during the COVID when people are just sitting around, they can't go to work, they can't leave the house, they can't see anybody. And if ever there was a time to focus people's attention on the great transcendent meanings of something more than the pub and telly and footy and everything else that's closed, and the Church of England blew it. And then when it all opens up again, now we're back and we're just going to peddle the same old clapped out Guardian nostrums all over again.
Well, the Church of England, of course, has been looking recently at its own practices and faith. And its policy has effectively been to embrace wokeism and to make racism almost the sole sin of which you or I or society can be guilty. I mean, the young lady you just spoke to, who was refused from Australia, her default position was to blame her situation on racism. The Australians were keeping out Iranians, although actually Iranians are being accepted in very large numbers in all advanced countries, as a matter of fact, including Britain. And yet they weren't keeping out people from Ukraine. Now, that's a foreign policy as much as a refugee policy. Essentially, we're saying to the Ukrainians, look, we recognize you're fighting for us, and you can come and stay with us. We don't think you'll stay long. And in fact, the Ukrainians are already returning in considerable numbers, despite the fact that the war isn't over. But this is not a policy solely connected with humanity. It's a policy which is partly a foreign policy and partly a humane one and partly realistic, because we know the Ukrainians are not going to sort of come here and simply hang around. As soon as they can get back, they will. And there are, yes, there are the points I'd make about that. On the Archbishop of Canterbury, one more point. He said that this is a policy, the Rwanda policy. That policy is designed for the interests of the rich and the powerful. Not at all. The rich and the powerful are very happy to have limitless numbers of immigrants coming in because they're cheap labor for factories, they're cheap nannies, they're cheap gardeners. They generally make life more easy for the rich and the powerful. Governments are that's the social.
That's a critical point. This fool Archbishop, the Archbishop of Canterbury, what's his Justin Welby, is actually the guy on the side of the rich and powerful. Thank you very much, John O'Sullivan. They're the ones who are hooting and cheering for all these open borders, the rich and powerful, because it wrecks your life. It wrecks the lives of the working class and the aspiring middle class, but the rich and powerful survive it. Stump the Steyn's coming up. Ask me anything you like. And Jillian Philip on how J.K. Rowling can cost you your job. Don't touch that dial.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Do you like adolescent fantasy novels? Erin Hunter is a very successful author thereof, even though Miss Hunter is herself something of a fantasy. She's the pen name of a kind of collective of authors who write those books. Among those who write Erin Hunter is Jillian Philip, or she was until she made the mistake of tweeting the hashtag I stand with J.K. Rowling. She's since lost her job, lost her agent, been fired by HarperCollins, and is now driving a lorry. Jillian joins me now. Jillian, you're pushing back against this by actually taking these fellas who've basically wrecked your life. You're taking them to court.
Yeah, with the help of the Free Speech Union, I'm trying to I'm claiming at the Employment Tribunal for discrimination. So, I'm just crowdfunding for that now.
You've had a rough time in the last few weeks because your husband died just a month ago, just last month, and then all this descended. Are you? Carry on. You're about to correct me?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, this happened back in 2020. So it was June 2020. When I had this Twitter mob come after me. Basically, I've been working for Working Partners since 2011. Right. And I'd had a Twitter account since before then. And I'd always been quite opinionated. I am quite opinionated, not abusive, just like I have lots of opinions. And I'd always put my opinions, and they'd always followed me people from HarperCollins, people working partners had always followed me, and they'd never complained, they'd never objected, they knew what all my opinions were. So when it came to the Twitter mob in June, well, my husband died in that year in May 2020. And it was just a little earlier than that, I think, that it didn't actually, I really can't blame J.K. Rowling. It was all my own doing. I'd actually started out by defending a writer called Rachel Rooney, who's a friend of mine. And that was what first me really riled up. She's a children's author. She had basically been driven out of the publishing industry by a really nasty, vicious clique of other children's writers. They had just bullied and defamed her until she felt she had.
Let me ask you about that, because the BBC's just come up for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. They've just come up with a list of 70 British authors that you should exemplify the best of the Queen's reign, and it seems rather odd that J.K. Rowling is not on that, given that she's the most successful author to have emerged in these 70 years. And so there's clearly a move at the highest levels in the publishing industry to disappear her, as they've disappeared you and they've disappeared Rachel Rooney and so forth and so on. I mean, what do you get from a publisher? Takes 90 whatever it is, 90% of the proceeds, 85% if you sell a little more, and then won't stick by you because of the hashtag you choose. Who the hell are the British publishing? These guys, when I had truck with them, they were like gentlemen fellows who'd take you for a good lunch or whatever. Now they're woke interns who hate your hashtag. Who needs these guys?
Well, yeah, I mean, the publishing industry is in a pickle. It's a pickle of its own making. The thing is, publishers, book bloggers, online reviewers, Goodreads, publishers thought they were going to get cheap, free reviews out of this and free publicity, and there'd be no downside. The downside was that these people started to believe that they couldn't just comment on the quality of a book, how readable it was. They decided they could comment on what writers should be writing about, what writers should be thinking, what writers should be saying in public. The very first Twitter mob that happened to a writer, the publishers should have laughed it off and said, okay, you didn't like what they said, it's fine. Okay, that's your opinion, this is ours. We are the publishing industry. We stand for creativity, freedom of expression. They didn't do that. They caved and they rolled over, and they've been caving and rolling over ever since. And they've kind of got themselves into this spiral now where they can't get out of it. And I think it's not what the publishing industry is supposed to be. And they know there's a problem, but they just don't know what to do about it. They're being run, basically, by online trolls, by their junior staff, who are mostly like middle-class, white, and very privileged. And they cannot stand up for their writers and for free expression. And it's actually tragic. I mean, as I say, that my publishers and the packagers working partner, they knew what my opinions were. I'd had discussions with one of the senior editors publicly on Twitter about this issue previously, and they never told me to stop. They never complained. It was only when the mob came along. They are terrified of mobs. So once that mob happened, I was done for. Yeah, they didn't even get back to me. They didn't. HarperCollins didn't call or ask for my side of the story. They just said you're out. And some of these,
absolutely contemptible. Well, it's absolutely contemptible. And just to go back to when they were still Collins, and as I said, these tweedy gentlemen publishers would take me to lunch at the Garrick Club once in a while. And I remember somebody saying to me back then, a long time ago, said, oh, publishing is the business for people who shouldn't be in business. Well, actually, what they're doing right now exemplifies that. Toby Young, whose Free Speech Union is backing you. You can say a lot of things about Toby Young, but he's a man of principle, and he will stand with you. in a way that someone like the HarperCollins crowd won't. So I wonder if it's maybe time for some of us who are committed to freedom of speech to get together and actually launch some publishing houses of our own.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know, because they just don't seem to want to do anything about it because they're so scared. I don't know how you would start a new publishing house. I don't know where you start with that, but it can't go on like this, because the writing that's coming out, especially children's writing, it's because they're not writing for readers. We used to say, are you writing for readers or are you writing for yourself? And nobody's doing that. Nobody's doing either of those anymore. Writers are writing for an imaginary future mob who could pick up on anything. They could pick up on the smallest thing in your book and absolutely tear your career to shreds over it. Run it past all the sensitivity readers you like, and they don't all agree with each other either. But someone can still pick up on something small. So it's resulting in this kind of fearful, dishonest writing. And the Victorians would blush at the moralizing didacticism of today's children's writing. We used to laugh at them, but children's writing is much more moralizing now. It's always, oh no, this is how you will behave. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I never cared much for the water babies, but that guy had a hell of a easier time. Now 99% of the body of the great canon of literature wouldn't pass the test of these hideous woke totalitarians. We're going to stay with your case, and we're going to have Toby on and the Free Speech Union, and we're going to follow this thing, because I'm sick of it. I'm sick of being told I can't do a hashtag. A hashtag vaporizes the entirety of my work. It's absolutely ridiculous. Lots of luck to you, Jillian. Good luck with that case. We're going to stay on top of this. Let's do a bit of stumping in our closing moments. Helen asks, when Vladimir Putin sees the President of the United States being minded by the Easter Bunny, what do you think might be going through Putin's mind, Mark? Yeah, if you haven't seen this, there's a little clip from the Easter egg hunt here, and there's Joe Biden, and that's presumably a Secret Service guy or Barack Obama or whoever's running the dead husk of a moth-eaten sock puppet these days. Might even be Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum. I hear he likes to dress up as an Easter bunny. But Joe Biden is being led around like he's a 5-year-old kid. Paul says, hi, Mark. Is it wrong for a British person to be looking forward to global warming as they can no longer afford to turn their heating on? Asking for a friend. Yeah, the government has to make a choice. Are you committed to net zero, or are you committed to high fuel prices? Because high fuel prices make global warming of great benefit. Conrad says, Mark, do those who advocate open borders for the United Kingdom think the Ukraine should have them too? That's Conrad. And it's a very good point. It's a very good point. The assumption of much of the conversation on this Rwanda thing is that Western nations are no longer entitled to borders. Well, screw that. They are entitled to borders. Without borders, you don't have a nation. Ronald Reagan said it 40 years ago, and it's truer than ever. Howard says, do you think we should ban foreign buyers from buying homes in the UK permanently? Justin Trudeau has proposed a 2-year ban on some foreigners buying homes. Yeah, that's because Hong Kong owns the entirety of Vancouver. I'm not really in favour of that philosophically speaking. I think people should have the right to buy homes in other countries. Certainly lots of people from the UK buy homes on the continent. Then again, I'm not in favour of foreigners buying homes and then the government confiscating them as it does to oligarchs. And the prices are going to fall, presumably because some of those oligarchs are no longer in the market. That'll do it. Patrick Christys is gonna thump your bank holiday Monday. Stay safe, stay free.
And looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, the UK looking to get off to a mostly dry start, some spells in places that are quite bright, and the detail like this. 1 or 2 showers likely across Cornwall, possibly the far north and the west of Devon, the rest of the southeast starting a little cloudy. You'll be very unlucky to catch a shower in the southeast, a fair amount of cloud likely there, so sunshine quite fleeting. Looking now at Wales, if we may, that is going to begin the day dry and quite cloudy as well, although the odd shower there may affect areas towards the western coastline. An outside chance of a light shower affecting the northwest of England, but for the majority, it will stay dry and the sun appearing through the cloud from time to time. The early part of Tuesday morning seeing a mainly dry day in the northeast of England, with the greatest chance of a shower cropping up the further south you head. And looking a bit farther north, if we may, to Scotland, you can expect a northwest to southeast split first thing. Breezy, showery conditions in the northwest, brighter but fairly chilly weather to start the day further east. Rains approaching much of Northern Ireland from the west, but at this stage in the day it's looking quite dry and bright, with a touch of frost affecting rural areas. And through the remainder of the morning, showers will begin to break out more widely, and by lunchtime, some of those turn